Secret friends, unite!
Hey, secret friends, welcome back to Oops, All Thunderdome. This is our topic show where we tackle something standalone, get into the good stuff. This is episode 568, and I am joined by our friend from across the pond, across several ponds. This is our friend Andi from Norway. Hey, Andi, good. Well, it's good late afternoon for you, early afternoon for me. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Excellent.
Some Spidey.
Yes. Oh, look at that. You're just cutting right to the quick. Yeah, we are in honor of the July 31st release of Spider-Man Brand New Day, which we're very excited about. Trailers have dropped. There's a lot of buzz going on. It's likely to be probably the number one movie of the summer, potentially globally, but certainly locally. If you listen to our show this past week, you heard us talk about our summer movie kickoff, and it's my number one choice for top performer, certainly domestically for the summer. But we're going to kick it off very similar to how we did the summer of Superman in 2025. This is going to be the summer of Spider-Man. So what we're going to do, unfortunately, there's not enough time to cover every cinematic Spider-Man incarnation, but what we're going to do with this series is we're going to tackle today's movie, which is Spider-Man 2002, which kind of kicked off Marvel's cinematic Spider-Man everything. Now actually celebrating, I did make a note of this as of today, this recording, which is May the 3rd, it's celebrating its 24th anniversary. And gosh, that was too early for you, Andi, I think, because I know when you were born. I won't out your age on the podcast, but you've told me in the past.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it. I'm like, I was 6, going to be 7 that summer, and I did not go and see this in theaters. I was too little for that.
Right. And I was out of college, and I had been a Spider-Man fan at that point for 15 years, going on 20 years. So I was really, really well versed. But we're going to dig into that. As we've kind of done retro recaps in the past, we're going to talk about some of our likes and plot holes and weird things that we would have had better, and then rate it. And then we will continue on doing that with our next episode. And our next episodes moving forward will touch the second incarnation, which would be The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, in our next installment. And then we will have time to cover all 3 of the prior Tom Holland Spider-Man films while the series is going on, that leads us right up to talking about the new film. But first and foremost, before we jump into that, I always like to give some love and respect to the wonderful people on our Secret Friends Unite Patreon over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite, where you do get all of our shows for free. You know, if you're listening to this on one of our free feeds, you're listening on a Thursday, but Patreons get it the Tuesday prior. You also get great exclusive shows, including a Bad Movies podcast that I do with my wife, April, which is going monthly here a little bit later on this year, and an exclusive channel on our Discord. So this is the way it works. Your first week is for free. Even if you sign up and don't even want to hear the content or pay for the content for that first week, you get it for free, and then you can actually stay on as a free member. Just get updates if that's what you want. But if you do stay on board, 50% off your first month, and you stay on board for as little as $2 a month. It is a lot of entertainment for $2, and we would absolutely love to have you on board. Patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Go there and check us out. Okay, let's talk about Spider-Man 2002. Okay, so this was obviously an American superhero film based around the Marvel Comics character of Spider-Man. That's pretty obvious. It's directed by Sam Raimi from a screenplay from David Koepp. It is the first film in Raimi's then later Spider-Man trilogy, which ran from 2002 to 2007. Columbia Pictures, Laura Ziskin in association with Marvel. So this was after X-Men 2000 X-Men 2000, which a lot of people, which was kind of the birth of the Foxiverse, if you're kind of disregarding the Blade films, which some people do, some people don't. But Blades, I won't say it's controversial, but I would say it's less kind of looked upon in the current day and age, especially with all of the hullabaloo of trying to get that franchise relaunched. This was before Fox gave us Daredevil. And again, this is produced by Sony. So this is really their first superhero film in the Marvel space in this time period. What's crazy about this is that the film had been in development since 1975, before even I was born, and stalled out for 25 years due to licensing and financial issues. I know very famously, James Cameron in the 1990s was looking to make a version of this. And you would figure if anybody could get it off the ground, it would be a name like James Cameron, but it did not materialize. Various directors were kicked around after a lot of this and that with the screenplay before Raimi was hired in the year 2000, and production obviously starting shortly thereafter. So being released on May 3rd, 2002, so again, an anniversary, received largely positive reviews from critics and was an enormous success. It was the first film to reach $100 million domestic box office in a single weekend, which has not been, as we'll reflect later on, has not been topped, even accounting for inflation, although obviously that's a record that's always set to be snatched away. It's a box office gross of $826 million. I'm assuming that's global, or against a $139 million budget. It was the highest grossing superhero film of its time and the sixth highest grossing film of all time, but only the third of 2002. So it's a big year for big box offices. Garnered nominations for Best Sound, Best Visual Effects at the 75th Annual Academy Awards, and a lot of other accolades as well. The film was credited with redefining the modern superhero genre and the summer blockbuster. Think about it. It was followed by two sequels, as we said, Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about those other two films, so we can talk about that very briefly just because we won't be covering them. My personal opinion, I think Spider-Man 2 is a better film than this one, and I think Spider-Man 3 is pretty awful. I don't know. What's your take, Andy, on those two films, just briefly?
It's been such a long time since I've seen those.
Yeah.
I don't think you're very wrong. Yeah. I think the second one is pretty good as far as I remember. And there are interesting things about the third one, but also some things that just didn't work the way they wanted them to.
Yeah. So it's a weird the third movie, I would say, is kind of the same old story. It's diminishing returns. Trilogies can be so weird. Your second film can raise the stakes and raise the quality of the story, which is, I feel like, what happened here. And then your third film can ultimately be a big letdown, or it can start high, get lower, and then hit the bottom, which a lot of people think about. The Star Wars sequel trilogy kind of feel that way. Love the first one. We're very middling about the second one, and the third one was a total train wreck. But again, a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts about these kinds of things, and entertainment is not all things to all people. All right, one last little bit of numbers before we jump into breaking the film down succinctly. Out of 278 reviews, this still to this day holds a 90% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty cool. And a 67% popcorn meter. So an audience score out of over 250,000 ratings. Now, I think that's weird that the audience score comes in below the critic, particularly for a film of this nature. Does that seem kind of weird to you? I mean, it just strikes me as odd.
Maybe a little bit, but also if you have the audience meter sort of updated, I can see how it has aged.
Ooh,
and then the
good point.
Audience, like, looking at it, with fresh eyes, being like, "This is kind of weird. This is very,"
and comparing it
old.
Probably.
And then the critics are still like, "Yeah, no, these things about it are good," and that was, of the time, and
right.
And
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in this.
But also, like, if you know what came before this, and then you look at all the new things happening here, right? If you're not completely aware of it, this can just seem like run of the mill.
Yeah.
Seeing what comes later.
Yeah, fair. Very, very fair point. All right, cool. Let's get into it. So in our typical fashion, and again, this is an almost 25-year-old movie, so we're not going to hold back on the spoilers. I figure if you're listening to this show, you've seen this movie, but we're recapping it just to zhuzh up our excitement for Spider-Man. So we're going to go through some favorite moments. We're alternately going to tackle some missed opportunities, weird plot holes, and what I call the et cetera. And then we're going to rate it 1 to 10. So we'll jump in. Why don't we go round robin? Andy, I'll give a favorite, you give a favorite, and we'll wind it down. My favorite is almost kind of a reverse, but it was kind of like a giggle. The CGI graphics of the opening sequence are hilariously poorly aged. They look so incredibly bad. But boy, at the time, I got to tell you, and again, you saw it when it came out because you were too young, was a really big, like, ooh, it was that way with the X-Men just a couple of years prior to this.
On rewatch, I was like, this is so fun and charming. I love the opening a lot.
Right. I know. It's a negative that I kind of turn around into a positive. So what's something that you loved?
It's hard to say, but I think part of it is the tone of this movie.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of sort of almost meme fodder here. And, it's enjoyable. Yeah. It's fun. A lot of sillier, goofier things are just enjoyable because you're having a good time with it.
Right.
But also, like, the moment when he rescues the tray in the cafeteria.
Right.
That's just a moment that stands out to me, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
That's one of my biggest takeaways, and I feel like this has been said by myself and other friends over the years, is that this film, I'll tell you what, I won't drive it because it's kind of my closing thoughts, but this film, I think, had a spirit that was unique, and I'll explain that a little bit more when I give my rating, but let's see what else and I will admit, without a doubt, even though I'm not the world's biggest fan of Tobey Maguire, who is playing Peter Parker, obviously in this film, the other ones that follow. I've always found him kind of off-putting. Maybe it's his like gigantic blue eyes. I don't know, which is very inside baseball. Peter Parker has brown eyes, but hey, what are you going to do? It's something that's small, but he is the right height and he's the right build. Peter Parker is about 5'9", about 160 pounds. I remember the stats because I grew up reading the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, so they're burned into the back of my brain in a place that probably only a closed head injury or some kind of senility would rob me of, but it's stuck there. He's otherwise physically great casting, but also I wrote Peter Parker in Amazing Fantasy 15, which is his first appearance back in 1962, is such a dweeb. He's a nerd and a geek beyond definition. And Tobey nails it. And I have no idea, like, he's a handsome leading man now, and it famously shows up in the tabloids is that he's my age, so he's in his 50s and has like a 30-year-old girlfriend. So he's obviously suave in some way, shape, or form, or he has a lot of money, whatever it is. But he nails the role of just being a dweeb in this film in particular spectacularly. So great casting. It's maybe unparalleled, as much as I really do like Tom Holland as the current incarnation of Peter Parker. I feel like they really nailed it here. So yeah, he's some rock solid casting. So what's something else you loved?
I really, really like Aunt May here.
Yeah.
Such a sweetheart. Like, she has such a warm, lovely presence. So that, I think, is where they absolutely nailed the casting on her.
Right. And so that's actress Rosemary Harris. She's British. And Cliff Robertson is Uncle Ben, and he is a golden age of Hollywood. And I wish I could sit here and rattle off some other films he's been in, but he's so famous, going back to the 50s and kind of the spaghetti Western era. I believe that was kind of his route, but some other really kind of blink and you'll miss it because they weren't so big at the time. Actress Elizabeth Banks, who's very famous as an actress in a ton of roles and as a director, really, she's moved in that direction, is Betty Brant, who is actually Peter Parker's first girlfriend in the early issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. So that doesn't really jump out at you because her role is so small and she's not even really named, but she's JJ's secretary, which was JJJ's secretary, which was kind of how you saw in this context. And then, of course, J.K. Simmons, who is my hometown brother. He is from my hometown of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. He is kind of like he's huge. Yeah.
Perfect casting.
He's like Hugh Jackman is to Wolverine, because someday, obviously, and they haven't done it yet, and that's obviously the joke in Deadpool, he's going to be playing this role till he's 90, because there just is not someone else that you can picture playing that role, as far as I'm concerned. Like, who else can do it rather than my hometown homeboy of J.K. Simmons? I'm saying.
He's just so great here. It's perfect.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it's just absolutely.
What to do, but the little screen time he has is just spot on.
Right, and he plays well. There's a lot of, and I didn't even write this down in my notes, but I'm thinking of a scene with him, and then the scene in Aunt May's house later. There's a lot of the Green Goblin blowing windows out in this. Like, that happens in his office. It blows outside of Aunt May's house in Queens. So yeah, this is weird. I guess Raimi, yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that and things that I don't necessarily love, but I really loved. I said every incarnation. You got to think about Spider-Man as any fictional character: Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, Batman. Like it has been done and will be done in a million different ways between now and the end of time, right? But every incarnation, I think, that is successful has to bring something new to the table. And this brought to the table the little grippers on his fingers, which he really looks at when he starts to realize that he can stick to things after he's the spider bite. And again, we're not going through and explaining the plot to you and, he got bit by a spider and blah, blah, blah. And again, in the original comics, radioactive spider, and this genetically engineered, which is a little bit more modern. It's a more modern take. And this is, of course, a little bit more spinning off of Brian Michael Bendis' The Ultimate Spider-Man, which to me, and I've talked to you about this, if I'm to introduce someone to Spider-Man from the 21st century, it's going to be with that comic. I've even turned Peter, my other co-host, onto that, and I've talked to you about coming on and talking about that. And at some point, I'd love to have you and Peter and myself just talk about that first 6-issue arc of the Ultimate Spider-Man, which covers basically the plot of Amazing Fantasy 15. So they take 6 issues, they take the 15-page story that was Amazing Fantasy 15 and turn it into 6 issues. We got to get that on the books, because I think that'd be something you'd really enjoy. But yeah, they added the little grippers and then the organic webbing, which has since found its way into the comics. It's cool, but it's gross. And I just saw you wince when I say that, so I feel like you have feelings about that. So hit me with it.
The update of the genetically engineered spider, I agree that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The organic web shooters, I'm not that fond of those.
Yeah, how come? Just because it's it comes out of you?
I don't know if that's it, but even though I didn't go see this in theaters, I was watching reruns of the 90s Spider-Man show.
Yeah.
On Fox Kids. That cartoon.
Sure.
So I was like, that's not how it works. He has the things.
Right. The webs. And again, and when he invented them in the 60s, they were like steel and with like a steel spring for how he activated them. So it was very mechanical. It wasn't even like they were, any kind of space age plastics or something, because Peter Parker's poor and he doesn't have the money. Even making the web fluid, he always said, God, it's very expensive to make this and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, part of it kind of cheapens that a little bit, but another part of it I found was inventive, because I don't feel like, and if I'm wrong, please hit me up in the comments, but I don't feel like that had been done in quite that fashion before. Now, there were parts of the comic where, Spidey drank a potion and he grew 6 arms. It's one of the Spider-Man figures I have hanging around here in my little menageries, right over there. Or, there was the time he mutated into a giant man spider, but I just, the organic webbing part, him using that when in his normal form, I don't feel like it had been done kind of to this point. So I liked that. I'll jump out and say there were some cameos in here of not only people who later became famous, I'll just keep the train rolling, but also some super quick ones that you're like, we had Octavia Spencer. Yes. Academy Award-winning actress, was taking money at the wrestling match. She was the check-in person. You had comedian Jim Norton, who's a famously foul-mouthed comedian, if you've ever seen any stuff. And Lucy Lawless as Xena, Warrior Princess, when they're doing the montage vignettes where people are talking about Spider-Man and the newspaper flipping by. So kind of giving you the sense of the passage of time. She's dressed up as like a gothy punk rock girl saying, I think Spider-Man's kind of hot, sitting there smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, that's Xena, who is, of course, I know her, of course, is number 3 in Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, one of my favorite shows. But
also Bruce Campbell.
What's that? And Bruce Campbell. Now, Bruce Campbell, that is, and again, I get into talking about Raimi's trademarks. They are very, very good friends. They're both from Michigan. They're both from Metro Detroit, so which is where I'm from originally. And yeah, almost anytime Raimi makes a movie, Bruce Campbell is what Stan Lee was, and actually Stan Lee makes an appearance in this as well during the I'll rip on it later, but the World Unity Festival sequence was the worst part of the film to me, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But Stan Lee moves a little girl out of the way when there's an explosion. You do see him, and that was not his first cameo. His first real cameo, I think, was in 2000's X-Men, when you saw him as Guy on the beach when Senator Kelly walks out of he's a fishman and he walks out of the water. He's on the beach there. So my last note is something that made me laugh. I wrote Harry and Peter's apartment makes me laugh because it looks like somebody's trying to copy the apartment from Friends, but they put a bunch of random shit all over the place. Like there's a basketball crammed in the corner. There's, cups like in places cups shouldn't be or stuff. So it's just like the set dressing was just like laughably bad as far as I was concerned. Got any more faves before we move on to less than faves?
There's also how they sort of handle the shift in tone. I talked about like how upbeat and funny and kind of cheesy it is at points.
Yeah.
But when they want to be serious, they are. I mean, the end,
like the burglar.
When we're at the funeral and we have the voiceover at the end, that doesn't quite land seriously. That's a little too much. But
yeah, I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah, but with Uncle Ben in the car, that works. When he's sitting there by himself crying after graduation, and Aunt May walks in, that works.
Yeah, big time. Big time, absolutely. All right, well, let's get the elephant out of the room. So my biggest dislike, missed opportunity, weird plot holes, whatever it is, the Green Goblin's outfit is absolutely atrocious. And again, you're a fan of the cartoons, though I feel like in the animated 90s cartoon, the Hobgoblin, which is that's my favorite Spider-Man villain, was more of the Goblin of choice. But if you go back to the Spider-Man cartoon from the 80s, say it again?
Hobgoblin comes first, but I think there's more Green Goblin. But
okay, because it's kind of yeah.
Goblin, the look in the comics and the 90s show versus this is that he has the outfit on. He has like a purple tank top and the shorts and the hat.
Yeah, and again, the Hobgoblin, or excuse me, the Green Goblin as a character debuted back in Amazing Spider-Man 14. So we're talking 1963. It's just a cloth costume with basically a Halloween mask, and more difficult to obviously replicate for live action. But they went with like a crappy, shiny suit of armor, like it was like a shitty Iron Man. But the mask, my problem with the mask is that the mouthpiece is like a grill that you would like, and you can see his mouth moving when you zoom in, and you can see his eyes behind the yellow lids. And I'm like, it was a horrible choice. That one should have gone past a couple of more writers' rooms, workshop in that deal, because it was absolutely the worst, and not even a silly good, just terrible. Say it again.
More design meetings about the look of the Green Goblin. I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I'm like, that's just part of this movie. That's what he looks like, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But also, like Willem Dafoe, he's just acting his ass off here.
Oh my
which
God.
I appreciate.
He drove the boat. I agree with you. What's interesting talking about Willem Dafoe is, as we'll get into on down the line when we are talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, which not only is the return of Tobey and then Andy Garfield, who is our next Spider-Man, with Tom Holland and the three of them, the trilogy, is that Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, does return as the villain, but he's not wearing this ridiculous outfit, which is thank God.
Yeah. Also,
so I'm
for one of his scenes where he's talking to himself, he's wearing a purple shirt. And I'm like, ooh.
Yes, absolutely. I noted for Kristen Dunst, and this really reminded me of what was a few years later when Jessica Alba was Sue Storm in the first Fantastic Four movie in 2005. The absolute worst wig you could ever see. Now, I know Kristen Dunst doesn't have red hair, but it's like, that was I don't know how much you bump into cosplayers if you ever go to like a Comic-Con or something, but you see some great wigs and you see some really bad ones, and this was on the lower end of that spectrum for me. I just thought, do something better. Dye your hair, Kristen. Come on, or grow your hair out or something. But it just did not track. Obviously, that's a very iconic part of Mary Jane's look is the red hair, but it just didn't land.
It's not like sometimes it looks sort of like a natural shade of red you might see out in the world, and in others it's just there's something off about it. Like the shade is wrong. It's obviously synthetic, but also just I'm not sure how much I love how they handle Mary Jane here. Like, I adore Mary Jane as a character.
Yes.
And there's a lot of like comic accurate things about her here, but they're also like I think her personality is a little off. And the whole he's been in love with her since he was 6. I think that suits Gwen Stacy better.
Well, I mean, it's neither, actually, because Mary Jane became a character in, I think, her first full appearance was ASM 42. Gwen was more like ASM 32 or 33. It was when he was in college. He met both of them. So really, he didn't have a childhood love like that. The childhood or the high school girl he never got together with was Liz Allen, who you end up, there's an incarnation of her in Spider-Man Homecoming. That's the high school. Or Betty Brant was his first girlfriend, and she was a few years older. So he was a few years older, wasn't it? First, so they've kind of taken some liberties and swapped some stuff around.
Yeah.
But I think
talk about Spectacular Spider-Man, and the way they do it there is basically have him and Gwen be friends. At the start of that show, they have the sort of like they've been friends forever relationship, which really works. But you also have Liz Allen, although that's in high school. He tries to ask out Betty, but she's like, "You're 16, I'm 20."
Exactly. Yeah. Doesn't fly. So they kind of bend some. They kind of Say it again.
And they introduced Mary Jane like a bunch of episodes into the show.
Which is appropriate because, as I said, the comic had been around for 3 or 4 years, but it was. I remember this is so ingrained in my brain. I remember these things. There was like a panel, and we're talking an issue maybe 25, where Aunt Anna, who is married Aunt May's best friend, so Anna Watson, who is her neighbor, is talking to a young woman whose face is obscured by like a potted plant or something, and that's Mary Jane. But it isn't until back into the issue 40 or 45, something like that. I'd have to look it up. That we get the famous "Hey Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." That is our first full glimpse of the character, drawn by the late John Romita Sr., who was, to me, the most iconic. Even though Steve Ditko launched the character, I really feel like John Romita. So JRSR, John Romita Sr., and his son is John Romita Jr., JR, who still draws the comic from time to time. He might be the current artist on ASM. I'd have to double check. To me, he's the most iconic. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. All right. The World Unity Festival, I alluded to it earlier. Absolute stupidest part of the movie. But hey, Macy Gray, I don't know. You probably don't have any idea who Macy Gray is. She was a one-hit wonder in the very early aughts, which is why she's in this movie. Everything about this, it makes no sense. It's this big thing in Times Square. The fight choreography is laughable, even by the standards of a movie like this. I mean, but again, much like you said earlier about the audience score, the popcorn score of more people going back and saying, well, I love this movie as a kid, but now after watching Tom Holland as Spider-Man, I think this movie is terrible. So it tends to lower the bar because we're comparing it to something that didn't necessarily exist at the time. But just watching it now, I'm like, ugh. I also thought, how the Green Goblin flies in and blows up the automaton suit of the Quest Aerospace, which is his competitor, and the thing is like a tube with legs. Like, oh, well, this is where I'm going to take my money from Osborne Industries and give it to this place instead. I'm like, I think they could have run that thing through a couple more drawing boards, because even to look at it for 30 seconds, I was like, what the hell is that thing? Oh, how about you? Anything else super ridiculous?
Like, a lot of the more ridiculous stuff I have fun with in this movie.
That's fair.
The thing that I'm a little like don't know about this. It's actually the whole relationship back and forth, because I don't really buy the chemistry, and it's also
Between
like,
Mary Jane and Peter, I
yeah,
assume you mean.
and
Yeah. And then
when
Harry gets
Harry's
thrown in
like,
there. Yeah.
you never made a move. I'm like, yeah, that's right. You never did. Like, you're just doing nothing about this.
Right.
So
Right. Now in the comics, particularly in the kind of our time frame, late 1960s, so we're talking, when ASM was coming up right around issue 100, Peter and Mary Jane and Harry were a couple, but she was very flighty, strung him along, and then when she dumped him, there was the very famous where he started taking pills and he took LSD, and it was the couple of issues, research says, trust me, where Stan Lee opted to publish issues without the approval of the Comics Code because the Comics Code didn't want anything about narcotics in comics, but Stan Lee felt this is a very important story to tell because this is such a prevalent part of our society, and this is something that kids need to know. And he published some very strong anti-drug messaging, which was obviously not a part of this, but yeah, Harry was he was not a ladies' man in the comic. He was kind of a rich dumbass, but Mary Jane was kind of mean and flighty, and she'd always flirt with Peter, but then she was always like, oh, it's not a big deal. And as you learn about her character, she does come from a pretty verbally abusive background, which is what you see in this movie, but she was never Peter's next door neighbor. Her parents, she was from Pittsburgh, actually, so not even the same town, so they never knew each other. But for the purpose of this movie, you see how they kind of need to roll all this together. April, my wife, had a great note, and it was right when you addressed that funeral scene after Norman has died by his own hand. And she said, why in the hell doesn't Kristen Dunst use her own damn voice in this movie? Because she's talking in this like, oh, Peter, blah, 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 blah. It's like, I've seen her in other movies. That's not what she sounds like. It was just, it really drove my wife nuts. So I cannot disagree with her on that point that, yeah, she's being very like, sing-songy and flirty in her voice, and I'm just like, ugh. Even Mary Jane, the comic character, has a lot more confidence than that she wouldn't necessarily kind of act in that fashion. So
I think also, even if a lot of that is sort of used to cover up how vulnerable she feels because of her bad family history,
right,
she does have more spunk or moxie.
Yeah. Like, spunk or moxie. Very, very, very true. All right. Let's move on to scoring as we're starting to wind down. I gave this like a 7.5 out of 10. I docked a point or a half point here and there because of some of the real like WB/UPN, which were two cornball like TV networks here in the States during that time period. Because it's like Flash Thompson's character, like he was a bully, but he was really like over the top. He had a buddy who was this, like they would always knock into Peter, like he's trying to take a picture in the beginning and they would like thunk, and they go, it was like, oh, that's a little too over the top. But what I alluded to earlier, this maybe more than any other cinematic outing really captured the spirit of the 60s into a film of what I started to read these stories in the 1980s when I was a kid because I discovered Spider-Man. I was reading current issues published. And then I went back and discovered back issues. I remember my first, and I found a copy of it recently. I found a digest. So a digest is a book that's, yay by yay. So basically like a paperback novel, but it was the first 6 issues plus Amazing Fantasy 15 in color. And I bought it and I read it until the cover fell off, then eventually disappeared. I found a copy of it a couple of years ago, and I have it almost like a museum piece on my bookshelf because it's so cherished. But I read those stories again and again and again. So they're so ingrained in my mind. And I could even tell you, it's Amazing Fantasy 15, and then in number 1 he fights a chameleon. In number 2 he fights the Vulture. Doc Ock is introduced in 3. Sandman is introduced in 4. He fights Doctor Doom in 6, and then he fights the Lizard Doctor Doom is in 5, and then in Lizard he fights in issue 6. I'll never forget that. All the useless shit rolling around in my brain, I will never forget that. But I thought that this film really, really nailed it for that regard. All right, how about you?
Yeah. If there's a movie that I genuinely like and enjoy, but I don't think it's fantastic or anything, I'd give it an 8.
Okay.
So I'm going to agree with you on the 7.5. because there are a few things that are not, peak, as good as they could be here.
Yeah.
And like, don't necessarily love all the Mary Jane stuff. A few of the things aren't, for the most part, I have a lot of fun with some of the more dated stuff and the cheesiness as well. But also,
Yeah.
that means I can't go that high. But a
Right.
7.5 is a genuinely good score, also, because this is
Yeah,
a good
I think
movie.
so. Yeah, absolutely. All right, couple of fun facts before we roll things out. I had mentioned previously this was the first film to gross $100 million in its opening weekend. And according to this, at that time, and no movie has since matched that, even adjusted to inflation. I feel like if that's true, it's something someday will come along and knock that off. But a lot of things have probably gotten really close. Willem Dafoe performed 90% of his own stunts, and there was a lot of jumping and kicking and punching for a guy who was in his 50s, I'm assuming at the time, because I think he's probably in his 70s, and he's probably right around my dad's age, so he's probably in his 70s now. Tobey Maguire had never read a Spider-Man comic, but took the role because he liked the script. Has really nobody ever read a Spider-Man comic? I guess not. All right. It does say in the wake of the September 11 attacks in New York City, Sony pulled back on teaser posters which showed a close-up of Spider-Man's face with the New York skyline prominently with the Twin Towers reflected in his eyes. Not all posters were recovered, and the ones that are still at large are clearly highly prized collector's items. That's not surprising at all. Oh, this is weird.
A teaser trailer where he makes a web in between the Twin Towers.
Yes,
and catches
I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah. This is so weird. David Fincher was asked to direct, and David Fincher is one of these being a movie buff yourself, is one of these directors that always does really far out stuff like Twin Peaks, for example. His version would have told the origin story in the opening credits, but it would have been based around the night Gwen Stacy died, which the end of this film does ape fast because Green Goblin does apparently die being impaled on his own glider. That is issue 122, which we're not on video, but Andy, if you look over my shoulder above Spider-Man's head, I have the poster, which is the cover of that issue, kind of obscured behind that cube right there. It's a very iconic image. As right after he catches Gwen, she breaks her neck, unfortunately, in the fall, and she dies. Spider-Man then goes on to fight the Green Goblin, but opts not to kill him. But then Green Goblin uses remote control to launch his spiky thing at him and apparently kills himself, though Norman Osborn lives because he's still a very active character in the comics. This was Joe Mangan. Oh, I can never say this guy's name right. Manganiello, who went on to be in the Magic Mike movies and a bunch of other stuff, and he's a big D&D guy. I think that's a big part of his personality. But this was his big screen debut. Christopher Columbus was offered this, but opted to make Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone instead. I don't think I knew that. That's actually pretty interesting.
I was wondering what might have beaten this at the box office in 2002. And the Harry Potter movie would have done that.
It came out, I think, the previous Christmas. I remember going to see it with a friend of mine. So if Harry Potter was still blowing things up, it could have been still charting 5 months later. You never know.
Or Chamber of Secrets.
That would have. You're right. That would have been later that same year. So that could have been one of the 5 movies that outperformed this in 2002, because this was number 6.
Yeah.
So, and I have to do some research. So, and then finally, Tobey Maguire had to have his Spider-Man outfit slightly remodeled from the original design to make allowances for the need to go to the bathroom. A vent was added that allowed himself to enabled him to relieve himself without having to remove the entire costume. Well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah,
could have involved in the situation.
A whole 10-minute operation just to get him in and out of that costume.
Oh my God. Yeah, because the skin tight outfit. Absolutely. So, well, that's it. That's a wrap on Spider-Man 2002. We will be back, I believe, in our next episode to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. So, Andy, thanks for being here. Always great to have one of my regular collaborators jump in. How do people find you out there in the internet sphere if they want to talk to you about Spider-Man?
I'm on BlueSky at Andi94.
Awesome. Good deal. All right. And I can, of course, be found not only running the Secret Friends Unite socials, but also my own personal socials, which are at the C3, TheCeeThree, Secret Friends Unite. Just search it anywhere you go. We're not on X and we don't mess around with TikTok that much. I do also, and trying to be more consistent, do my little 3 minutes or less dining room chats where I just tell you about something that I'm enjoying that we haven't had a chance to talk about on the show. And I've got to jump in to talk about Superman, Spider-Man / Spider-Man, Superman, which were a series of one-shots that came out recently from DC and Marvel. That's on my tablet with notes that I've got to talk about. But other than that, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to tell you as always that sharing is caring and to keep on trucking.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.